Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you as always for stopping by. Political reflections. President Xi Jinping joined foreign leaders who are in Shanghai for the China International Import Expo on a visit to pavilions of different countries. Interesting article in Bloomberg Opinion by David Fickling. A new east-west railroad, caution to the wind and bring on the dragon dancers. More often than not, train transport is neither the most logical nor efficient way to move goods, and traffic remains dwarfed by maritime volumes. If the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result, what are we to make of China's plans to build a Silk Road railway through the heart of Asia? After all, those who think steel tracks are the best way to shift goods from the Pacific to the Atlantic have been able to use the Trans-Siberian Railway since 1916 and practice the efficiency, flexibility, volumes, and logistical simplicity of maritime freight have won out again and again and again. It's well worth reading. Thanks to China and Russia's heavy endorsements, east-west container traffic over the Trans-Siberian Railway's three main routes has surged to 278,000 20-foot equivalent units in 2017, from 43,900 in 2014. That's still less than half of the 480,000 TEU increase in traffic that shipping lines achieved over the same period. It's a tribute to the romance of rail travel that whenever a train inaugurates a new path along the 12,000-kilometer odd corridor between China and Europe, it's greeted not with reflections on the route's obvious inadequacies, but by dragon dancers, media scrums, and breathless plaudits. China will lend to debt-choked Pakistan, but won't bail it out. Imran Khan failed to secure a major public commitment of financial support on his first state visit to China, with leaders from both countries appearing cautious despite promising to strengthen their all-weather partnership. Chinese Foreign Ministry suggested that it will adapt the nature of its support to Pakistan, tilt in favor of areas relating to people's livelihoods, according to media reports. Zimbabwe, fresh winds are blowing, is a lovely article in Vanity Fair. In front of me, cutting across the trail, marched a column of black ants. "Blow," said Ant Kashula, my guide, at the Gonarezu National Park in southeast of Zimbabwe. Intrigued, I put my lips together and blew as if it were my birthday. And the insects were candles. They hissed back at me, a defensive mechanism to ward off predators. We watched them hastily reconverge and continue back to the nest, each carrying a bounty of termites in their clutches. And then jumping, there are estimated to be more than 11,000 elephants here, a record since counting began in the mid-70s. That translates to one of the highest densities of these animals on the African continent. Authorities are now considering reintroducing rhino. "What's the secret?" I asked Hugo van der Westhuizen, Gonarezu's committed Director General. "The community," he replied. "I spend a lot of time under the shade of trees talking to people. When I leave here, I hope they say they were good neighbors, they were willing to listen. That, of course, is the only way forward." There wasn't a man-made sign of life. Instead, I noticed the frisky wind, the feathered cloud formations, the faraway escarpments, and heard the descending notes of a spectacled weaver, followed by a melancholic tropical bulbul, and the loopy whistle of a pearl-spotted owlet, all punctured by an aggressive male impala, whose rutting noises sounded more like a monster. Even in the flat, fading light, the bark of the gigantic baobabs had a polished metallic sheen. Read it in full, it's worth reading. Zimbabwe is ready to be discovered again. And For the first time in 37 years, it is ordinary people who might be setting the tone for the future. Last November, Robert Mugabe, one of Africa's longest-serving leaders, stepped down. There was a dance party in the streets of the capital, Harare. Some who I met on this trip said it was the most important day of their lives. There was hope now, but also fear to hope. Everyone has a story. It's well worth reading in full. On my last night, I headed to Lake Kariba, where Bumi Hill Safari Lodge had only just had a shot of investment. Global was one of the region's first black safari operators when he founded African bush camps more than 10 years ago. But business was so slow he was forced to diversify into Zambia and Botswana. I was waiting to transfer back to Zimbabwe when things turned around. He said, "That's now." We are in the economic war situation. We are confronting a bullying enemy. We have to stand to win. This is news the United States that on Friday will temporarily allow 8 importers to keep buying Iranian oil when it reimposes sanctions on Monday. Today, the enemy, the United States, is targeting our economy. The main target of sanctions is our people, said Mr. Rouhani. This is an economic war against Iran, but America should learn that it cannot use the language of force against Iran. We're prepared to resist any pressure. And the Trump administration blinked on Iranian oil sanctions. They didn't want higher oil prices running into the midterms. So as the November 5th date loomed for countries to eliminate oil imports from Iran, the Trump administration blinked. Syria detects no Israeli attack since the Russian S-300 delivery. This is what I was saying on the 24th of September when I said Putin needs to shut out Netanyahu over Syrian airspace or shut up. He chose to shut him out. Syria, the new terra nullius, seat of an Islamic caliphate, site of Middle East's newest liberal democracy, socialist paradise. Syria, corrupt and murderous dictatorship that practices genocide, a failed state, a state that is too strong, soon to be partitioned into ethnic enclaves, a pawn of Iran, Syria, tool of Russia, a haven for terrorists that threaten our friends and way of life. Syria, where Saddam sent his fabled WMDs. In other words, Syria is whatever you want it to be. Syria, if it exists, apparently only exists to satisfy your desires, where you get to freely confuse where you think the world ought to go with where it is going. Interesting takeaways from Henry Kissinger's session on China's past and future. Have a read, and then I also read my piece from the 15th of October, War is Coming. James Dean is seen photographed by Dennis Stock in New York City in 1955. And of course, James Dean was part of my story on the 9th of July when I said Trump has now turned his attention to Xi Jinping and thrown in the keys, challenging him to a cheeky run. James Dean was an iconic American actor who tapped into the universal yearning and angst of nearly every adolescent human being, with a raw connection that has surely not been surpassed since. In one of his most consequential films, Rebel Without a Cause, 2 players, read teenage boys, decided to settle a dispute. Teenage girl, by way of near-death experiences. Each speeds an automobile toward a cliff. A simple rule governs the challenge. The first to jump out of his automobile is the chicken, and by universally accepted social convention concedes the object in dispute. The second to jump is victorious, and depending on context becomes gang leader, prom king, etc. Buzz, the leader of a local gang, agrees to a chickie run. Both race stolen cars towards the edge of a cliff. The first to eject out of his car is branded a chickie. Moscow and Beijing are finding lots of common ground. Indeed, Prime Minister Trudeau apologized to the Tsilhqot'in community for the hanging of 6 chiefs more than 150 years ago. He rode into the valley on a black horse, symbolizing the ones the historic chiefs rode into what they believed were peace talks.